Welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight to our last workshop. If you have not seen the other ones, we'll talk about that a little bit more later at the end about where to find the filmed versions and how you can go about that. But otherwise, this has been a great collaboration, I think, that and a great set of events. So I'm glad to see many of you, your faces from every of them. So that's great. We are going to hear from 5 different organizations tonight, 6 speakers total. They're all experts in their areas, and we hope that you learn a lot from all of these different groups. We sure appreciate that they're here to share their information with us. If you have questions, and we don't doubt that you will, please save them till the end, and we'll have a question and answer section at the end. So just take note of them and save them to the end. And I'd like to bring on Justin now. He's going to to introduce each of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Kevin Sharp from the People's Food Co-op will be our first speaker. Kevin is the marketing and member services manager at the People's Food Co-op in Ann Arbor, and it has over 8,000 people in the community who support it via donations. And it is a full-service natural foods grocery store that specializes in local, organic, and fair trade food and other healthy products. He's been with the co-op for over 20 years, and he is also a food lover at heart and grows and cooks much of his own food at home. So please welcome Kevin.
Thank you, and thank you to Think Local First and Whole Foods and Growing Hope for putting this together, and thanks to everyone here for coming out. We, as Justin mentioned, we're a co-op. We're a consumer-owned cooperative, which means we are owned by the people in the community, currently around 8,000 member owners. I think the uniqueness about a co-op is the ownership structure. And when we get to talking about how do we select foods or bring foods into the co-op, I think a common misperception is that we have a bunch of people and we do that somehow by consensus, or it needs board approval or something like that. And the decision-making process is really probably more akin at our co-op to a traditional business model than not. And so we have department managers who are responsible for making those decisions, which products to bring in, and they're responsible for various areas of the store. So I think one of the things to consider is, with each retailer that you're going to talk to, or a restaurant, or whatever it is, what that particular process is. And for us, I think I would recommend maybe calling first and introducing yourself and saying, my name is so-and-so and I make a particular product. Who at your store purchases that? And that's probably the most direct route to the appropriate person at the store. We do get a fair number of calls, and they get passed on to me or the general manager or various people, and I can always direct somebody to the appropriate source, but it's probably the most direct route is just to ask who, for your type of product, who purchases it. I started out a little over 20 years ago as the produce manager, and so I made a lot of the decisions then about in the fresh fruits and vegetables and whatnot, what to bring in, and a lot of it has to do with that initial introduction, and some familiarity with our product line. I think we're a natural foods grocer, and so our product line does exclude anything with a chemical preservative or coloring. So I think knowing that up front is helpful. And then also, I think having samples available, that's helpful as well. We probably wouldn't bring in a product that we aren't able to try ourselves. That shelf space is very, very valuable, as you all know, and it's not always easy to sort of nudge another product out of the way to get in. But we have written into our policies that we are to give preference, and very core to our values is to give preference to locally produced products. So that does give you potentially a leg up, or at least get our attention. We're a relatively small retailer, and so that shelf space, like I said, is very valuable. And there's got to be sort of a good compelling reason for us to bring that in and give it a try, and sort of rent that space on the shelf, so to speak. And then in the end, really, it's going to be the consumer that is going to decide that. If we can't sell it, then it doesn't do us or you any good to have it in our store. But we are able to give some additional support in the way of social media coverage or signage at the shelf. I think an openness and a willingness to do some sampling. So coming in on a busy Saturday, we're right across from the farmers market, so coming in during a busy market day on a Saturday and talking to shoppers and sampling out your product, that's another great way to get a good foot in the door. But really, I think sometimes the thought is that as a retailer, we would buy the product from you and we're kind of the end of the line, but we're really not. Obviously, the consumer is the end of the line, and so we have a real openness and willingness to try new things, and in the end, it's got to sort of get its own legs under it and take off, and it's got to have a following. So we're very open to and encouraging of working in tandem with you, but in the end, it's got to just take off. So I would say, in addition to samplings, asking for the correct person to really kind of have a direct line to that person that's making that decision. If you have any kind of support information, you're not expected necessarily to have your own shelf talkers or signage or things like that, but if you do, that's helpful. Those are things we can generate on our end, but if you came through the door with things already sort of ready to go, that certainly is helpful for us as well. And then just an openness and willingness to kind of work with us. It might be on the cost somewhat, it might be on placement in the store, it might be on certainly that sampling support, just any number of levels. But a lot of it long-term, in terms of long-term viability with working with local folks who are producing products, is kind of really building that relationship with the purchaser at the store level. I know as a produce manager, that was very important to me. It was somebody that if there were issues, I could call up and talk to them, that we really kind of felt like a team. It wasn't just a business transaction, but it was something more than that. And we kind of worked as a team in keeping and promoting that product. So I think that's it for me. It's it's a very worthy pursuit, and there's a great energy out there for locally produced products, and there's a tremendous market for it. And as a relatively small retailer, we have a real openness sometimes. There's not a lot of sort of corporate hierarchy at all where we are, but then again, the space is relatively limited, and so it's a very competitive market, but it's totally worth pursuing and getting your product and your name out there. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Justin. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Next up to speak is Robert Cantelon from Arbor Farms. Robert is a co-owner and store manager of Arbor Farms Market, which is an independent natural food retailer founded in 1979. Prior to joining Arbor Farms in 2004, Robert was also store manager for Bush's Fresh Food Markets. He began his career in the food retail business as owner and operator of the Sun Bakery, which is Michigan's first organic bakery. So please welcome Robert Cantelon.
Thank you, Justin. Well, I thank Kevin for getting us off to a good start. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, sponsors. I don't really have anything planned. It's going to be a little bit of a stream of consciousness. When I think about food, I think back to the beginnings of my food career, and I do that because I believe that probably most of the folks here are idealists, probably pretty idealistic, and I was extremely idealistic when I started out. Kind of got out of college. Some buddies said, "Oh, wow, organic foods, yeah, let's do that." And I said, "Well, that's great. I don't have anything else to do." And and it was like this really cool thing that we were going to do. We were all going to live on the farm and grow our own food and come in and grind it all up and make it all nice. And I think one of the things that intrigues people about the food industry is because there's such a direct connection between, wow, look what I can do. I made this and everybody likes it. What a great person I am and how successful. And it's easy to see that. But, running a business and actually making a living doing it is really a completely different thing. So, we started this business out and we were grinding our own flour and we were bringing in trainloads of flour from Texas because there was only one guy in the country that grew organic wheat. And I think our idealism really clouded what we were doing. We started out with 3 people, a year and a half, 3 years later, 70, 80 hours a week later, $30 a week later, 2-3 years down the road, it was like, whoa, hey, I didn't sign up for this. Well, they all dropped by the wayside. I was the fool. I never learned easy. It was, I always just had to learn the hard way. So everybody dropped out, and I'm running a bakery. And I did it for 12 years and eventually learned how to do it. Why do I say this? You can save yourself a lot of hard knocks by really, really thinking ahead. I mean, way down the line, really developing a picture of what am I trying to do? What am I trying to sell? What do I want it to look like? Maybe even just as important as any of that, what do I want my life to be like? Do I want to work Monday through Friday during the day? Do I want to have to beat the street for investors? Do I want a direct contact with people? I think one of the challenges is that inevitably, if you want to have a food business and you want to run a food business, it's not going to be about you making the food. It's going to be about you hiring, training people, being a manager, being a communicator, and ultimately, at the end of the day, having a plan. So, I feel a little bit like a fish out of water because I'm not an idealist so much anymore. I'm a fairly value-driven business person, retailer, but I've kind of gotten over that idealist part. Because you really, really need to figure out, where do I fit in? So, as this relates to a product and getting it to market, the things that come to my mind are, really, what are you trying to sell? Who's out there selling it already? If you're trying to put a product on, the grocery store shelves, well, what else is already there? Not just, at your favorite market, which could be a great place to start, but the thing that you have to ask yourself is, well, that's great, my favorite market. Maybe the manager will talk to me, and maybe the manager would even give me an idea of how much, if I had a product on the shelf, I'd be able to generate every week in sales at their particular market. And you might find out that it's, 40 or $50. We'll do the math on it. And all of a sudden you start to realize, I can't live on that. That means if this market's going to sell $50 worth of food, I'm going to have 1,000 markets. So how does this come into play with thinking ahead? Well, if you really are trying to sell a product to retailers, which I guess that's what I need to talk about because I'm a retailer. There aren't that many products where a single retailer is going to really kind of take you to the bank, so to speak. By thinking ahead, you've got to be thinking ahead about labeling, signage. If my product is just sitting there on the shelf, I like to tell people, well, yeah, but does it bark? Is it going to squeak and bark at the consumer as they walk by? If it isn't, you got problems. So you've got to somehow make that occur, and that could occur through a great label. Yeah, that's okay. I remember back in the day we had this label designed by Gary Grimshaw, the guy that did all the acid posters, and it was a fabulous label. It didn't really sell bread, but, cost us 6 cents each back when you could only get 99 cents for a loaf of organic bread, and I'm spending, 5%, 6% of that on the label. So that's a piece of it, but as Kevin alluded to, it's demos, samplings, it's representing the product yourself. And then you kind of go, well, I'm going to be in 10 stores. I don't want to spend every weekend sampling the product. Well, then you need to start thinking ahead about distribution. Wow, distributors, they want money. Well, they do want money, but they also open you up to the ability to reach as many stores as you're going to need to reach. Why do I need to think ahead about that? Well, you need to think ahead about that because if you don't look at your pricing model right out of the gate, you're going to find that, well, God, my customers are used to paying $2.99 for this. And if I give it to a distributor, now it's going to be $3.99, $4.99. They're not going to pay that. Well, you've got to picture that right away, and you somehow have to build that value into the product. One company that I hate to beat the drum for them, but they do deserve a little beating is Zingerman's. You look at their bread, they bring their bread in. Guess what? You're going to pay $5.95 for it. Okay? They're probably going to sell it out of their bakery. Well, you'd pay that at my store maybe. If you went to the bakery, you might pay $5.95 or even $6.95 for it. So they're making me, the retailer, look good because I'm not charging more. I've got to pay for the cashiers, the rent, the heat, the light, the insurance, the workman's comp, the health insurance, all those things. So I have to charge a little more. But guess what? Zingerman's isn't making me look bad. On top of that, Zingerman's is letting me have a 40% margin. 40% margin? You mean if they sell it to you for $3, you get to sell it for $5? Well, yeah. But I eat all the shrink. I throw away 15 to 25% of it. I work it every day. I give it the shelf space. as I look back on it, especially, again, coming from a perishable food, thin margin, need to sell a lot of volume product that goes bad right away if you don't sell it, they've got a great business model working because they've figured out their pricing system right out of the gate. They take care of their retailers, they take care of themselves, and they've built value into the product. Not everybody's going to be able to do that the same way. The advertising, the marketing, a lot of the things that they kind of bring to the table. But in a sense, those are going to be the folks that you might be competing against should you want to bring a product to a grocer's shelves. So when I am contacted by somebody seeking to sell their product to us, the first thing that I might say is, well, first of all, probably not going to get that far on the phone. I really feel like you're better off coming into the store because the first thing I'm going to ask for if I have any interest at all is samples. You got to leave samples. And you need to be prepared to speak about where your product is going to fit, your pricing structure, where else you sell it. If you're selling at the farmer's market charging $3 and you want to charge me $2.50, what am I going to do? You haven't thought ahead and built it in. And then if you're going to deal direct to me, well, guess what? What's going to happen when you need a distributor? Because you're not going to hit all these stores yourself. But having said that, I can honestly say I don't have a specific model. The folks from Triple Tree Farm came into the store, and they're going to be speaking in a while. I mean, they called me up on the phone. They told me what they were doing, and I just about rolled over on the floor and said, "Oh my God, please bring your product in." Like almost too quick, really, because we didn't do a good job ourselves of rolling it out to our consumers, but the product was so very unique and nobody else was doing it. Don't know that there are that many products out there that are really unique like what they bring to the table. So when you contact a retailer, number one, he's going to be harried and busy, and he or she, and not, just going to wonder. It's like, the thing that I think is okay, I'm going to invest 30 minutes or an hour here. What am I going to get back? What am I going to get back? And there are some products where you just kind of go, gosh, what do you want me to do with that? There's 4 other people out there already doing it, and it just doesn't fit. And other products you're going to go, wow, that's really wonderful. And I have a particular, warm spot in my heart for bakeries, so I would just about talk to everybody about bakeries, although over the last several months, several people have contacted me about new wheat-free, gluten-free bakeries. And now I'm at the point where I'm going, well, what do you want me to do? We're already dealing with 2, and there's just no more room in the market for more. In my store, anyway, it just doesn't do me, that much good. So thinking ahead about your business model, what you're trying to bring to market, what's already in the market, what's on the shelves, how can I make my product unique, what are the selling points, how am I going to communicate that to the customer, how much time am I going to spend beating the streets myself, or do I really need to get into the food distributor broker network and get that big and be that big out of the gate, and think ahead and have the funding to do it. We started the bakery, and I can tell you honestly, thought of none of that. It was just this great idea, and we went around and worked our tails off, and a lot of people got frustrated and dropped out, and I didn't. But, I worked 80 hours a week, lost my marriage, created a big hole for myself because I always learned the hard way. And, I kind of doubled back and raised my kids, came back to the game a little bit later, and some friends said, well, gee whiz, let's see, it's 1988. We know Whole Foods is coming to town. We know we better all entrench ourselves in a better store because they're going to be here soon. So let's look around. I was with a group of folks. We spent $5,000 looking at sites. Couldn't find one. They took their money away. I thought, well, gee whiz, I'm glad that didn't happen because I didn't know how to run a store. So I went back and got 15 years of grocery experience. And by working in the industry that I wanted to be in, I learned how to do it. So then 15 years later, an opportunity came up, and we were successful right out of the gate in a bigger location. I think that's relevant because, again, I really encourage y'all to really think ahead, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line with what you're trying to do, how much money you're trying to make, and how you're going to accomplish that. If you do call about a product, calling is okay. If the product is interesting enough, we would probably meet. But probably half as many people, I'll say right on the phone, what are you selling? Are you self-distributed? If you're self-distributed, may not want to talk to you. It's kind of a cruel thing, but when you've got 40, 50 people coming through the back door every day, and you've got to receive them all. And not only do you have to receive them all, you've got to take the time to not just invest the 3 or 4 hours that it takes to get them set up as a vendor and develop an understanding of where you're going to go with them, but every day, 5 or 10 minutes, another phone call or two, placing an order, receiving the order, stocking the order. If your product is not very unique or your product doesn't fit into what I would call the perishables game, meaning it's not a deli product, a seafood product, a meat product, a produce product. If it's just going to be a on-the-shelf grocery self-distribution is tough. And ultimately, if you're successful, you'll find that out for yourselves. Had the opportunity to speak with a vendor the other day, and we went right down the line. Well, okay, here's your product. Show me your complete product line. Show me your samples. Where do you perceive it fitting on my shelf? Okay, if you're going to be in this area, I'm going to want this margin. Is that built into your pricing? If your product goes on my shelf, is it a guaranteed sale? In other words, are you going to take what doesn't sell back as buybacks? If not, then your margin needs to be a little higher. If you want to be on the perimeter of the store, meaning in the big wide aisles that everybody goes by instead of way down here on the bottom where nobody can see you, a grocer is going to want to have more margin for that space. How many days a week are you going to deliver? Who's going to work your product? Are you going to come through the back door and just drop it off? Or are you going to actually take it, price it, put it on the shelf yourself? Rotate it, take care of it, in other words. Are you going to demo it? Are you going to sample it? Active sampling, passive sampling. I would always encourage active sampling. The issue then becomes you're probably going to do it yourself. Either that or your eloquent child perhaps might do it. Hiring a demo company, I don't know if any of you have gotten that far, but I don't feel very positively about demo companies because you usually end up babysitting them. And then the other thing is, again, marketing, ad programs, discounts for preferred placement in a circular or on a sale. And then terms. Nobody, again, the other issue with working with direct store, single item suppliers is you got to order it, you got to receive it, you got to stock it, you got to talk to them. Then they're probably talking to your grocery guy for 10 minutes while he's supposed to be putting, another 15 cases on the shelf. And then you got to write them a check. And I think that this is something that's really important to look at because most businesses are only going to want to write you one check a month, maybe two if what you sell is very perishable. But generally speaking, most places are going to come in, they're going to want you to deliver your entire month of September, and then you might get a check from us on the 12th or the 17th for everything you sold in that 1 month. So that's very important to build into your cash flow. Because the more the more deliveries, the more orders, the more checks we're writing, you're measuring all of that against the uniqueness of the product that's being presented to you. Yeah, and I probably, I don't know if I come across as an idealist. I'm probably fairly much an idealist, but a lot of it is really realist. I mean, you know, when you start getting out there and you're moving in the world of Kroger's and Meijer's and Bush's, and, you know, if you're aspiring to bring a product to market, you're gonna come up with meeting some fairly callous, fairly right to the point, overworked managers and buyers who really, really need you to really understand what's going on. And the more you can understand what's going on in their life and with what they have on the shelf and with what you have actually fits into it, how you can make it easier, how you can actually increase their sales per foot off of that shelf. If you can come in and speak to that intelligently and really understand the selling points of your product, and you have it somehow you know, a formulation or a system for being able to help pass that information along to the consumer, you're going to have a winner. And if you don't know that, you quite possibly could get shut down a lot. So, having said that, you know, I mean, really, the customers are just, I mean, they're clamoring for local. And as you know, as much as local takes more time and energy, ultimately, you know, we're here to serve our guests. And sometimes you take a product in knowing you're not going to make money on it because it is such a unique product that maybe even somehow has a local following before it ever really gets to your store. And obviously that's probably the best model that anyone could create because that's what the really big guys do. They come out with the TV advertising, they come out with the coupons, then pretty soon you've got customers asking for a product that's not even being distributed in your area yet. But they're setting the table with that consumer demand, that consumer awareness of what it is, so that when it does hit the shelf, it's not going to end up on some, you know, no sale movement item report and get discontinued within a month or two. They've already developed a market. They understand where they're going. They're understanding how they're going to build that market and gradually expand it. And they have some real strong sense of where they want to be with this product in 3 years, 5 years. So that's about it. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Robert. Our next speaker is Corinne Sikorski with the Ypsilanti Food Co-op. She is the general manager at the Ypsi Food Co-op. She's been involved with the co-op since the days it was transforming from a buyer's club into a storefront in the mid-'70s. And she is also very active in the Ypsilanti community and is the current chair of the Friends of the Ypsilanti Freight House. So please welcome Corinne Sikorski.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Robert and Kevin, for giving a great introduction to our program, and now I don't have to go through all that. The Ypsilanti Food Co-op is a consumer-owned business, like the Ann Arbor Co-op, but much smaller. We have about 850 active members. We are here in Ypsilanti, over in Depot Town, which, if you're familiar with Ypsilanti, is our other little business district east of where we are right now. And we've been in Ypsilanti since the mid-'70s, and idealism is what created the co-ops and Arbor Farms and Whole Foods and probably every grocery store that evolved into some big, huge grocery store started as somebody's ideal of doing something to make fun or money while they're having fun. So I would encourage you to, go for that idea that you have, but following all those things that Robert talked about are what make a product be something that we can put in our store. Even though we're small, we have the same constraints as the big stores. Maybe even more so because we have less staff, we have less capacity to deal with all the different vendors or people that come to us on a daily basis. But we do want to carry products that are local. We have a purchasing policy that's very strict about the types of products that we carry, and we especially are interested in I'm going to kind of read my list a little bit. Foods that are whole and minimally processed. Being organic is a plus. They don't always have to be organic, but we appreciate that. Free of chemical pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, irradiation, GMOs are things that we don't want in our food. And so we carefully screen what we carry. We appreciate things that aren't packaged as much, so minimal packaging. And when it is packaged, packaging materials that are recyclable or recycled. Environmentally responsible and social justice, cruelty-free practices are all important to us and our customers. So when you're looking at how you produce your product, it's not just what it is, it's about how it's been produced or grown or raised. So we're going to look at all those different things. If you're a producer or a grower and you want to bring a product to our store, samples, again, are great. As much information as you can bring us about your product in writing is always really good. Our buyer, we have a purchasing manager and then buyers, so maybe they aren't in that day, so it's something that you could leave at the store for them to look at their leisure. And giving them a call, but not a lot of calls, is really great. So some persistence, but not calling us every day, because we do have a lot going on. We have a lot of products that people are trying to bring in, or just keeping up with the products that we already have. On occasion, we'll deal with products on consignment, which means we might want to try it and see how it does before we make a decision that we're going to really work at keeping it in our store. And then we wouldn't pay you until we decided if it's really going to fly in our store. That doesn't really work with produce. We usually buy produce outright, because if it doesn't sell, it's not going to be any good. But things like books, general merchandise kind of products are often things that we'll try that way, because we do like to have other products besides just food. We have art, like ceramics, or we do have a few local books, jewelry, things like that. So other products do come in our store that we like to try. Systems are really important for how we deal with a vendor, making sure that, like we've already heard about marketing, how we deal with ordering. So we wouldn't want you calling us every day or every week. We'd want to work out a system of agreement of how often should we check in, or how often do we think we're going to need to buy this product. Because every time we get a phone call, as Robert mentioned, you have to stop what you're doing and talk to folks, which is great, but we have a lot of that going on. Payment systems, as was already mentioned, terms is often necessary for us. We can't stop and write a check every time, and also realizing that everything goes through a process, and so we may not get our checks out the day after the month ends. It may take us a couple weeks to get all those checks, because we have hundreds of vendors to send checks to. Pricing to be competitive, as you heard earlier. We can't sell it for a lot more than you would sell it at the farmer's market for, and look good to our consumers. So if they're buying it at the farmer's market and then they come in our store and it's twice as much or quite a bit more, they're going to think we're a really bad store to go to because we look really expensive. And so that doesn't do us any good, and it doesn't help your product sell. So we would expect fair pricing in a way that we can both compete with each other and have the products being sold at a similar price everywhere. Reliability and consistency, having your product available as needed. So if you have something one week and then the next week it's out, it doesn't help us. We can't hold your spot on the shelf till it comes in again. And so over time, we're going to not be able to have that product be something that's usually on our shelves, so we just won't carry it. So those are kind of the main things that I think are important for you. We have a process in our store where you bring it in, and either myself, the general manager, or our purchasing manager, or our produce manager will be making a decision about the product depending on what it is. And we go through a system inside our store of deciding how does this fit with what we already have? Do we need this? Does it fit our purchasing policy, our product line? And make a decision that way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. All right, our next speaker is Johnny Gates from the Corner Brewery. Johnny is a member of Corner Brewery's kitchen management team. He's been in the hospitality and food industry for over 13 years. And Johnny has made it his mission to integrate local food as a staple of Corner Brewery's menu. He has a passion for fresh organic produce, healthy living, and community organizing. So please welcome Johnny Gates.
Hi, everybody. So thanks for coming and supporting what we've got going on here in Ypsi. I know most of you are local. But in any case, I just want to go through my spiel and make sure I get the best information out to all of you. So building a relationship with a business like a restaurant is a little different than most retailers. Chefs, for one, don't often have time to be on the phone or to reach out to the community or to send email. It's a job that we do with our hands, so it's kind of unfortunate that I feel like a lot of chefs don't have the opportunity to put down the knives, step out into the community, and ask questions like, "What do you make? What's available? What do you have to offer our business?" I'll tell you right now, I'm from the DC area, and it's a food desert, and it's depressing that I couldn't reach out when I did live there. To local farmers and growers in the way that I can here in Ypsi. So have hope. There's businesses that support what you do. As we've touched on idealism here, I would hope that most businesses and restaurants would source locally and kind of challenge themselves to make that a part of their mission statement. Realistically, that's not happening in every place, but here, have faith that a lot of restaurants and businesses can support what you do. So with that being said, I think showing your face has been touched on here. It's kind of like a relationship between restaurants and the community. We expect the community to come patronize us, but we also need to do our part to reach out to you guys and offer products that speak to the community and speak to what's in people's pockets. Ideally, chefs like me would come out to farmers markets. I try to make it out to our local farmers markets and champion our local vendors and food producers, but that doesn't always happen. So don't hesitate to walk into your favorite pub or restaurant or kitchen. Say, hey, I have something local to offer. How do you feel about that? The worst thing an owner can say is, I have no response. I have no opinion about local food. I don't know if you'd hear that. They might at least have a negative opinion, but at least saying, hey, how do you feel? It gives them room to say, well, I'm interested. What do you have to offer? Put yourself in their shoes. Who wants to be the big bad business on the block and not have anything that represents the community, the city they're from, and the people that live there. So I think getting your foot in the door, showing your face, and at least saying, hey, how do you feel? This is what I have to offer. Because, again, you can't expect a chef to step out of the kitchen when they should. You can't expect an owner to reach out and do their part. In an idealistic world, yes, but in reality, that doesn't always happen. And you've got to make it happen for yourself sometimes. As far as products in demand, again, in an idealistic situation, I would say that people should source seasonally. A long time ago, you didn't have the option of having food trucked in. And I think we should behave more responsibly as businesses challenge themselves to source locally, to design their menus locally, look to the local community to say what's seasonal, what grows here, what doesn't grow here. Michigan is great for that. I love living in a state with farming communities where people can do for themselves, where Washington, D.C., they cannot. I think that if you're going to do business with a variety of restaurants, you have to expect that some will source locally, some won't. Some will take pride in where their produce comes from. Some will just looking at the bottom line. Not every single owner can afford to buy locally, and that's the reality we live in. The GFS food show, the Cisco food shows go on for this reason. So that is that. But at least asking the question, saying, hey, how do you feel? Gives you room to say, well, we've got a budget for local food. What have you got? I expect it to maybe cost a little more, or it to be a little bit of a hump to work with the local vendor, distributor, or grower, but it's worth it. When you meet those type of people, it really can push you forward to take something small and grow it. We have a bartender at Corner that had an idea that they'd grow mushrooms just for fun. He's now selling to our kitchen where he bartends to local restaurants, and it's something that he's doing with just 2 people. So again, a lot of small ideas do grow, but you've got to really push forward and break down those walls of, well, I can't do this, or I don't think there's room for my product. So seasonally is great for a lot of local businesses. I think with a stagnant menu, there's not a lot of flexibility. Local restaurants will tend to push specials, to experiment, to change things up for the community. That is a regular source of income. They don't want to leave them bored and know what they're expecting every week. So chains, bigger venues that are across the country, it's a little tougher to crack into them. I think a lot of their menu ideas are coming from the top down, from places miles away, and they don't often have the decision of where their food comes from. Even some franchises that are within the state of Michigan, they'll still have to wait to get confirmation and say, hey, I can accept this product, or I can source this product. It's okay with whoever I'm paying my franchise fees to, or whoever is above me. With proteins, I know that some folks grow chicken, do beef, do lamb. Proteins are tough if you're not a bigger guy, if you don't have a farm. But proteins are something that I look for. I look for organic, local, hormone-free. Clean proteins are not just a trend. People are really waking up to where their food's coming from. My father grew up on a chicken farm and produce farm, and I kind of just showed him, look, Dad, you know what a chicken breast should look like? Does this look like the chicken you grew organically 50 years ago? He said, no. Everything else he'll still kind of dabble in traditional GMO food, but he at least can, my 56-year-old father is kind of awakened to organic and clean and the changing food issues. So expect that people are asking more questions, wondering more about where their food is coming, and I've had to respond as a chef and offer that to the general public. So if that's something that you do, understand that we are challenging ourselves as restaurants to get into that where it is expensive, or more expensive, I should say, and less popular. It's comparable in my eyes to exotic proteins. If I brought in bison, I would expect my entire staff and patrons to ask me, where did you get this? Who's growing bison locally? Who's farming this? And I'd have to have an answer for them. With at least slightly more expensive chicken or beef, I can say, well, this is local, this is clean, and I'm proud to serve this and have something to say to the folks who patron the restaurant. Another thing that's kind of tough for us, breads. I know that it's tough to be a baker. I'm a cook, and I tell my cooks that baking is different than brewing beer, is different than cooking, French culinary, you name it. It's all different. It's tough to source great bread. In large quantities, you are better off being a bigger guy with lots of machinery, gear, a way to transport and distribute your baked goods fresh. If you're a smaller individual, it can be tough to kind of find out, I've only can make so much quantity of bread, who buy this? Can I only sell at farmers markets? Can I offer this to restaurants? And again, if you don't ask, you won't know. My particular restaurant can get by with, say, less bread than a restaurant who focuses on deli sandwiches or cold cuts or something like that. So if you don't know, you don't ask, you won't know. So fresh breads are something I think a lot of folks are capable of doing. A lot of restaurants are capable of diversifying and going from the big guy bread to a local bread. We get ours from Avalon out of Detroit, but we could quite easily do with a smaller vendor. And that may change later on and things change, but, bread is something that I think is kind of a staple food for most people in most cultures. But that's something that's very, very important. It's easy to take for granted when produce or proteins kind of take the limelight. Desserts, again, something that not every restaurant can do. I can't bake bread in my current setup in my kitchen, and most restaurants can't. So we source it from other places. Desserts are the same thing, unless your kitchen specializes in desserts, or you've got a dessert maker on staff, or you've got a bakery team. Places are limited in desserts, so I definitely source desserts from River Street Bakery, and we're proud to do that. It's a local product, and we stand by it. We also bake our own where we can, but it's not to say that we could not source desserts from the person looking to grow their small dessert business. It starts from someplace. Some ideas we've tried out recently that we never thought would work, or folks will never buy this, we'll just test it in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we can't make enough of these. Wish somebody else was doing this. So desserts are, again, a small thing to a lot of folks, but to a restaurant that could be your extra 5 to 10% growth that wasn't there. Let's see. Quantities. Most restaurants deal in bigger vendors' terms and quantities. So I'll throw out some standard quantities and conventional quantities that restaurants deal in. Something like chicken, we do 40-pound cases. I've seen that at a number of restaurants I've worked at. It's kind of a standard 4 10-pound bags. Whether or not you can do 40 pounds of chicken regularly, again, it may not matter to certain restaurants. If you've got an awesome, poultry product or beef product that you can say, hey, this is hormone-free, or this is grass-fed, or this is, raised in this way, I think you would appreciate this. I can only do this quantity. How does that fit into your menu? There may be room for a very, very small limited amount. My restaurant does specials. If I can take 5 pounds of something here or there, I definitely will if I think that I'm never going to see it again, or that I may not have access to that from a bigger guy. And that happens quite often enough. Potatoes, 40 pounds. Those are 40-pound cases. Sometimes we do 50 pounds, but about 40 pounds for potatoes. Tomatoes, 20 pounds. So a lot of the staple foods, between 10 and 40 pounds. But, again, if you're doing something smaller and can come to a chef and say, hey, I've only got 5 pounds of this, but I think it'd make a great menu idea. I've had someone offer me 5 pounds of tomatillos and then sell 200 tacos based off of that as a topping. So, it surprised me, but again, sometimes best. If you can come in with information about your product and say, hey, you may not know a lot about this, and I may not have a lot, but this may change what you do in a small way, and it's significant. But those are just a few basic quantities. Again, it's kind of up to the restaurant what are their staples versus local staples or seasonal staples for where you live. But if you ask the question, they may be able to say, you know what, that works for me. Or if you can do this in this many days per week or this many days per month, that works for me. Just don't be afraid to ask. And let's see. That's about all I've got. But I would say to all of you, just take time out of your day to step into your favorite place, ask questions that you might want asked of yourself as a business owner or as a small business owner or vendor, and be human with folks. I think if they're going to do business with you in the first place, you'll end up having a working relationship that lasts longer than if you are shoving your product down their throat or they're cramming a price down your throat. You probably don't want to do business with that person at all. So just be yourselves, and I'm glad you came.
All right, thank you, Johnny. All right, our last set of speakers are from Triple G Farms. is Briannon English and Jeff Yoder. Triple Tree Farms is an Ypsi-based farm born from two urban farming families in the heart of Ypsilanti. They use season extension techniques to provide local food for as much of the year as they can, and they care deeply about the local community and growing clean, ethically grown food. So please welcome Briannon English and Jeff Yoder.
Thank you a lot for having us here, and thank you for everyone that put this on. I think this is really important for producers because everything everyone has had to say so far is true and important, and we had to take a little bit of a longer path, and if something like this was available when we started off, it might have been really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So from our standpoint, it took us a while to get our product even in order. We had to figure out what we wanted to do, and my wife had this idea we should grow microgreens because she'd read about microgreens. Well, maybe that would be fun, and they'd be fun to eat. So we grew just some, and we started there. We really liked them a lot, and we sort of got into the swing of things, and we got the Englishes involved, and so then we're both eating microgreens, and now we got a lot of them, and what do we do with this? We got so much of this. Well, let's do a market. So we joined a farmer's market, the downtown Ypsilanti farmer's market, and we shared a booth that year. It was just last season, and basically all we had was microgreens. And they were just flying off the shelf. Like, people just loved them. And so we thought, well, this is pretty cool. So we just sort of happened into it that, we just happened to stumble on the product itself. Most people, I hope everyone finds a product that does that for them. I think it could be a challenge to find a product, though. For us, it just sort of happened. But the thing that surprised us, I think, was how popular it was, and how scarce it was in this area. Like, there really was no one else growing it. There was no one else bringing it to market. There's a couple of vendors, but they weren't offering sort of the other varieties that we offered. We were offering some sort of like radish and red cabbage and things that like had color and things that restaurants really liked. And we noticed, well, there's fancy restaurants around. Like, Ann Arbor's full of fancy restaurants, and this seems to be like a pretty fancy product. So let's take it to some restaurants. And so Bree and Grace went out to we ended up into one grocer. That's the Ypsilanti Food Co-op, because they frequented the market, and so they saw our product, and their produce manager actually approached us and said, well, we'd like to talk more about this. And so we talked with her, and we started selling our products there. But then decided to sort of go into the restaurants. And so we sent the girls out, sort of.
Yeah, we took Johnny's advice, and we just went into a restaurant for my birthday, and we enjoyed the meal. We noticed that they had some microgreens. We sent the server back to find out if they were local. They were not, and so we said, here's our card. Will you have the chef contact us? And she did, and we got an account the next day. It was great.
Yeah, we maintained that relationship for quite some time. And then we sort of started, maybe we should tack on another grocer. So we talked to two other grocers, one of which was the Arbor Farms. And, they were very receptive to our product, and they liked it a lot. They had sort of they had these terms that they sort of laid out for us. We didn't know anything. We were just like, oh, okay, there's terms? Oh, great, I guess we'll abide.
Yeah. Oh, we have to think about how we're supposed to price things?
Yeah, so then now they're running margins. Okay, what do we do? I don't know. How much is this really costing us? Because we weren't really looking at the numbers so much. We weren't really thinking down that far down the line. We're just, this is kind of a neat thing to do. And, we enjoy doing it. And so her husband is a numbers guy, so he ran some margins. And, so we had some back and forth with Arbor Farms, and that sort of, it really helped bring us into our own, I think, that discussion. And at first they did this trade procedure where we would buy back anything that didn't sell, and so we sort of learned there, and the product seemed to sell well enough that pretty soon we weren't buying back what didn't sell because everything sells pretty much. There's, as far as I'm aware of.
Yes, everyone loves it.
So we added Well, so I had that restaurant account that was going pretty well, but the product wasn't lasting as long as the chef wanted. So we said, okay, well, we'll do these other packages. But the other packages cost us money. And so we just sort of charged per package. So okay, we're doing 5 packages, we'll just charge this much per package. But the chef didn't like that. She said, well, other farmers don't charge for packaging. And we just couldn't understand that was true. That they don't really, are they rolling it into the price of their product or something, but we were just charging, sort of this flat rate per package. So we said, well, this is how we want to do it, and I guess if that doesn't work out, that's a bummer. And she just said, well, it doesn't work out, so good luck. So we
lost an account.
So we lost an account that way. But, we had this so we have these values that, slowly built up. We want to be honest, and we want to be open, and we want to have a good product. If the product's not good, we don't have a product that week. And with microgreens, believe me, the product sometimes is not good. They're very fickle things, and so it's challenged us to try to make a consistently good product and to anticipate the market, because there's lead time for them. Thankfully, they're faster than growing a tomato plant and getting tomatoes. We're looking at maybe 2 weeks tops for some varieties, and most varieties about 10 days. But that means, most chefs don't operate on 10 days from now. Most chefs operate on, well, what do you have today? Because it's the weekend, it's Friday. I want twice as much as last week. Well, I don't have twice as much as last week. So we're trying to anticipate those and then work sort of that into our margins without adjusting the price too much. And it's been a challenge, but it's certainly been a really fun adventure.
Yeah.
But we're idealists. We're still in that idealism phase, and we're not really making a lot of money, but the business is paying for itself, and we're able to invest all the extra money that we have back into the business and help the business itself grow. So, now we're putting up a hoop house, and we've got a bigger farm space now. So it's sort of like this tiny little plant, the tiny little microgreens. They helped us grow, into a much larger adventure, really.
Yeah.
And it's been really quite a blessing to have the folks around us that we have, and to really have the community right now focused on this local food movement. So I think, again, like Bree said, this stuff is really important, and it just feels so warming to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
The end.
We're going to turn it back to Christine. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is the time where you have about 5 minutes to use the restroom, get a few more grapes or Rose's tea, and come back and we'll have questions and answers. And if you're thinking about leaving, sometimes things that come up on these question and answers that are really important for you to hear. So consider that before you're heading out a little too early, okay? Okay.
I really don't have a question, more a thank you. All the information you all gave tonight was great. I wanted to just share a little bit of information I picked up yesterday. There is an organization which is Local Orb, and if you don't know about them, there is some contact information here. Basically, Local Orbit relinking the food chain, a phone number of 734-545-8100. And they do a lot of things, but they're going to help with distribution, which, Robert, thank you so much for hitting on that. We hadn't had anybody really do a great job like what you did tonight with that. It was awesome. But they are currently going to 2 local markets, Detroit Eastern Market and Allen Marketplace in Lansing, and they're going to be hooking up with the Washtenaw Food Hub. So they can get you out into those, Detroit and Lansing, as a possibility. So that's it. I promised I would give this to Glenn. There you go.
Hi. So last week I was here for, the going to larger retailers presentation, And one of the things that the presenters from Whole Foods mentioned was their sort of data capabilities, and they have this portal where you can find out, which of your items is selling and how much it's selling, and maybe some of that, sales per foot information, and they do like ordering from the aisle with a little scanner and all that stuff. Are there smaller scale options? Have any of the smaller retailers, looked into having any of that, data that could come back to a producer, and have sort of an easy way for us to access that and maybe streamline some of those, phone call oriented sales processes? Is there anything like that in people's consciousness?
Anybody want to talk about that?
Okay, I'll go for it. Well, we scan and we do use data. How much of it ever gets back to a producer or a distributor, we regard it as proprietary information to a certain extent. How do we use it? We use it to place orders, seasonal orders. Sometimes we'll do category reviews, or specifically to probably your point, I had to go back this past week. We have a protein supplier. In our enthusiasm, because it was so local and so unique and so different. A couple years ago, I made an agreement with this supplier that I would take all of their product. And they had, it was poultry. They were raising, maybe 300 to 400 birds at a time. And what started out as a $350 to $400 order, which was kind of where we wanted to start, gradually just kept morphing and morphing. And and it's like, gosh, I love local suppliers. We want them to stay in business. We're even willing to not make money and sometimes take a loss. But it gets to a certain point where, and I think this is part of what the other folks all touched on, you have to be sensitive to the fact that it has to work for both people. And these folks are great folks, but I don't ever really get that they could put themselves in the other side's shoes. And so I pulled the data a couple times. I pulled it 6 months ago, and I said, look, we've been averaging this much over the last, 3-month window. This is what you're selling to us. You need to drop these 3 units. You need to limit the amount that you're bringing us of these other units to this window right here, which they did. Again, working with a lot of people, I don't really have time to be a coach all the time. When someone delivers that kind of message to you, you have to kind of read between the lines and go, my product must not be selling like I want it to. Maybe I need to get behind it. And maybe they've got so much going on, they're not going to specifically ask me to get behind it, but guess what? I'm the one that's invested in it. And if I've invested this much of my time in it, do I really want to put it at jeopardy when this person says, hey, watch out here, it's not really selling, we need to cut this back? What's that going to do to your business? And if that were to happen again, what would that then do to your business? I don't think that they really grasped or had the outlook to see that. So then I had to send them another letter this week saying, well, look, not only has your sales on your product fallen from the level of about $600-700 a week on average, now it's $425, $450 a week. I've run it over a couple different windows. And guess what? We've got to cut your order back again. Mm-hmm. And I really apologize, and I'm going to give you 2 months' notice. And I'm going to eat the $200 a week that we're spending on sending your product from our store to food gatherers in that time. Mm-hmm. Because I value you as a local supplier, and I think what you're doing is great. But ultimately, boy, you just can't trust any single store. You can't trust any single outlet. And it is really good to ask the question you're asking, hey, how is my product doing? Because ultimately, whether it's hard data, whether it's specific to your product line of 10 or 12 SKUs or whatever, or whether it's just an impression, you're going to get the feedback. And you need to really be open to that feedback from the person that basically is representing you, because we're in it together. But you won't always necessarily get the time of day, from a retailer. Don't wait for them to give it to you, though.
Okay.
I would agree with that. And, for the size store we're pretty kind of wired into all of that information. The scanning at the registers captures that from barcoded items. And if we've attached a PLU to it, say, and produce is a prime example, then we can go in and relatively easily pull out sales data or movement data. We get also national data for the big brands that come through various sources, but we can look at sort of sales history and what's trending up and trending down. But for local independent products, of course, we wouldn't have that kind of a data. But, most of the products of you folks that we would carry, it's small enough, and there's maybe, a handful of SKUs or a handful of sort of in your line that we would carry that we could, relatively, it wouldn't be too difficult to have our finger on the pulse of that. But in terms of going in and pulling out that specific data, that's where it gets a little cumbersome, and unless it's barcoded or we've attached a PLU number to it. So.
Okay.
I was going to say, just as a vendor, when I hear something like that, I think, well, that organization is too big to have a private, personal conversation with the vendor. So they've had to design some sort of system where they can communicate those things without really communicating it face to face. So personally, I like the personal relationships that come with, vendor to produce manager, vendor to store manager. So that's the sort of thing that I personally like to target.
All right. Thanks.
I think everybody's alluded to it, that, that just knowing the right amount of face time is really critical. Because face time is very important. It is really about relationships. It's about your relationship with us, our relationship with our customers, your relationship with our customers that we're helping to foster. So, a lot of it is just knowing just the right amount of questioning, and then, okay, I can sense they're busy, I'm going to move on.
All right. Thank you.
As a grower, how do I bring samples when it's 6 months ahead of harvest time? And how's the chef going to know, what the quality that I have? You're not going to have time to come out to my farm and feel the sunshine, or even if they're chickens. I mean, that could be funny and bring one in, but that's not what you want to see in a restaurant.
That's fair enough, and you're absolutely right. There's kind of no way to do it ahead of time for certain products. You have to wait for your produce to grow, and chicken, you can't really, you can't taste it before it's processed and ready to be eaten. One thing I would stress again is, relationships are that important. You kind of have to be forward thinking, like Robert mentioned earlier, and look ahead and ask yourself, where do I want to be next year? And if I want to be in this restaurant or this market or with this retailer, they're going to have to either try my product or get some sort of, maybe not guarantee, but some sort of understanding that, I can meet you in the middle with pricing, or I can, do this for quantity. But the taste of something, you're absolutely correct. You haven't tasted it until you tasted it. I would say that it's tough for even, an experienced chef to say, well, I don't prefer your green peppers to said green peppers that I bought from this vendor. It may depend on the product, and if you've got a unique product, that a lot of times will speak for itself. But there's no easy way to really to convey a taste or a sensation of those type of products. I would just food-based kind of work on building the relationship with said chef or restaurant or food-based vendor distributor, and a lot of times just based on the relationship, you let the product speak for itself. And there've been very, very few times where I've gotten a product without tasting it and have had to refuse it. And a lot of times you'll get a kind of a sixth sense and saying, you know what, this doesn't smell quite right, this doesn't look quite right, this isn't what I expected. Give it a shot, and then if it's not appropriate, refuse it. but a lot of the relationship building will kind of take care of that. If you've got your ducks in a row and your product is inspected by the USDA or, through whatever channels that it's regulated, that's half the battle. The taste and the competitiveness of your produce or your protein against the other local produce or proteins, that's kind of the in the trench battle that would depend on your local food scene. That's the kind of depends on the neighborhood and on the community and on the availability of said things. But I will tell you that most folks are still not in the habit of coming in and talking to the chef or the sous chef or the owner. So you're that much further ahead if you've started the relationship building.
Being able to come in and tell us the story about like how you grew it and if it's protein, so it's animals and they're happier. That's important to us. So hearing that story and being able to explain to us what your growing techniques are, if it's a produce or something like that, really important to us.
I was going to say that predicament is precisely why we have farmers markets. So grow your food, grow your produce, have your protein, bring them to market. And when you've got them and they're ready, that's when you develop your relationships with your grocers and your chefs.
Right.
Because you still have a market for it. And you can see what sells well. You see directly. People love my tomatoes. I should probably approach, this store about these tomatoes. People love this chicken. I should probably approach. But then you're not out all that money, all that investment. You might be out a little bit, but not as much. Right. And if a store really likes it, well, then you just don't do a couple markets. And instead, all that produce goes to those stores or goes to those chefs.
I mean, there have been I'm a city guy. I don't know anything about farming, but it has to be like the ultimate entrepreneurship because you never really know what the Lord's going to give you. And so many times you'll talk to somebody, well, I'm going to have non-GMO sweet corn. I'm going to have pumpkins next year. I can sell them at this price. Oh, that sounds great. 1 month before you're supposed to be selling it, you kind of check in. Hey, how you doing? Oh, man, I lost my crop. Well, that's great. But, now I'm sitting there 2 weeks out from whatever season, and I don't have any, I've turned down some other local folks based on our relationship. It seems to me that even though that it's, farmers markets are still growing. There's still more of them popping up. CSAs, even though they're probably getting more competitive to sell shares in because they're probably reaching like a bursting point in terms of, the number of people out there that are willing to subscribe, to me seems like a good base from which to establish an income flow. And maybe you have to spend 80 hours a week because you're growing it and you're marketing it. And that's the tough part, to be a grower, a distributor, and a marketer. Ultimately, maybe you only want to be a grower if you love farming. But if you're trying to kind of get your wheels under yourself, I got to believe that, CSAs and farmers markets are the place to really establish your ability to project your crops, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.
I was going to suggest that, depending on what you're growing, if it's a sort of a niche item like the microgreens, that's definitely, yours are going to stand up above the crowd a little bit. If it's zucchini and tomatoes and, green beans in August, it's going to be a little harder to get your toe in the door that season. We've got to have some compelling reason, and I can't think of too many why we wouldn't buy from our local grower that had planted in anticipation of us buying from them, and we've been buying them from them for the last 10 or 15 years. So we've really established that long-term relationship. But you could get in with maybe fill a niche if they can't meet all of our order one week, or if you have some specialty item, we start buying that from you. We have that relationship going. We're already on terms with you, and then as other needs come up, you can sell those to us as well. But it kind of, for me, it depends a little bit on what you're growing and when you're approaching us about it. Even if you come to us in, say, this time of year and want to sell to us next year, we're going to have to figure out, well, what do you have that we're not already getting filled by our local growers that we've had really long-term relationships with? And there are things out there, but we'd want to have that conversation first. So once you have the zucchinis in hand, that's not the time to come peddling zucchinis in August, because that's when everyone's got them. So,
And then towards proteins, I mean, let's say, I mean, I have geese and ducks, I mean, for specialty menus, but yeah, I can sell them direct farm sales. But how do I bridge that gap of, you know, the inspections and getting them to the butcher, and then how do you guys pick them up? They have to be delivered. You mean, you don't want to buy frozen geese from the back of my pickup truck, I know that.
right? You can't,
Yeah.
legally. Yeah, protein's a whole other area. Anybody wanna tackle that?
I mean, I can share my experience with that recently. Comparatively, you know, I have a farmer that I source our beef from. You know, he kind of explains the process to me of what's going on, how often and when, and I, you know, explain to him what the needs are, and we go from there. So he may say, you know, Johnny, I've got a cow going to slaughter at this point in time. You know, I have this much beef on hand, frozen, ready to deliver to you, or this is what the timeline is looking like at said particular meat processor. He has to know this information so that I can know this information, give him a yay or a nay. You know, I would say that kind of the best thing to move forward is just do your homework and, you know, build that relationship and figure out what their needs are and what you can and can't do. Not every restaurant is flexible, but it's worth it enough for, you know, some restaurants that, you know, work with somebody. I found that my food cost, for example, is much better dealing with local vendors, which is odd to me. Item for item, they are more expensive, but my food cost is improved because I can play with different quantities than the standard. If I don't need so much, I can say, ask, what if I only need, you know, 10 pounds? Can you do only 10 pounds? That's something I feel the smaller local vendors have to offer that the big ones will offer less and less. So it is worth concern of saying, you know, how do I get from point A to point B with proteins? But if you do your homework and you're patient and you build those relationships, you may come out on top. I think another thing that's worth exploring is growing restaurants often can't deal with the minimums that a big company or a bigger company may deal with. You know, I may not need 20 pounds of tomatoes if I've opened the door 2 months ago and business isn't there yet. You know, it may be better to just deal in only local vendors and then have less waste to deal with, for example. So it's one of those things you're going to have to figure out what's the best place for me right now and what do folks actually need or can do or, you know, can deal with.
I mean, one question I would have is, and I raise my own geese and guineas and pheasant and chickens, turkeys, so I know a little bit about that from the sort of homegrown aspect, but meats, it's a whole other ballgame. But I'm wondering, since there is obviously a built-in sort of so many weeks between, you know, hatching and harvesting, that one approach could be to, instead of go around and say, well, this is what I have to sell, is to go around and say, what do you need to buy? What are you missing now? What's a niche that I can fill for you? So, you know, I don't know, but, you know, one of the local restaurants, maybe they would be willing to, you know, do something with guinea or with pheasant or with partridge, or, you know, I mean, those are some real kind of specialty foods, although here to some extent goose is kind of a specialty thing. But rather than say, this is what I do, you know, will you buy it? But maybe have that dialogue ahead of time and say, you know, how can I fill your niche, or, you know, how can we kind of partner with this on some level? Maybe that would be another approach.
If you really are thinking of raising the, you know, exotic poultry or whatever, my experience is that it just doesn't sell in a grocery store. You know, maybe a place like Sparrow Meat Market that's really specialized into meat could sell a little bit of duck, guinea, Cornish hen, goose, rabbit. I mean, it all sounds great. It looks wonderful on the Food Channel. Anthony Bourdain does a great job with it. But ultimately, if you're trying to sell it, people are going to have to cook it, and people don't cook. So if it's something that you're really thinking of doing, I'd take it right by way of the restaurant. And there are some local distributors that handle smaller amounts that would distribute to restaurants for you. But you would really have to do a lot of footwork with talking to the chefs and making commitments and getting it on the menu, because there isn't a retailer that would be able to do anything with it that I know of.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Hello, my name is David. Question for the panelists. We are all crazy about prepared foods and crazy about carbohydrates. And there is a movement in the country they call the Paleolithic diet. And would like to have the panelists comment on experience with the market for prepared foods that are oriented towards meeting the needs or demands of those who eat a Paleolithic diet. Thank you.
By prepared foods, you mean like deli salads, deli entrees? Oh, well, as soon as you put it into a deli case, you're counting on turns, lots of turns. And we really have my store has a pretty strong paleo clientele, because we do a lot with local meats, and we've made the investment in the system and being able to process it ourselves. We do a fair amount of trucking. And so we're known for that. People that are into the paleo diet view us as a destination. They'll come to see us. But when we look at putting something in the prepared food case, you always have to ask yourself, okay, if I've got a beef soup here that I can sell for $4.29, but if I make it more unique, all of a sudden I've got to charge a multiple of how much price per pound that costs. And when you're talking prepared foods, as you might be talking in a restaurant, you're talking about doubling, tripling, the cost. So as soon as you start using more specialized products, the more specialized it becomes, the more resistance there's going to be to paying for it, especially when you deal mainly with a very diverse clientele and a lot of people that are price conscious, and maybe you don't have a strong high disposable income clientele, which we don't. An example might be salmon. We sell a lot of grilled salmon. We try not to sell Atlantic salmon. In fact, we don't. Typically, we'll buy a salmon from Chile that's not fed GMOs nor colored. So we'll use that to grill in the deli. That might cost us $6 a pound. Well, we're going to sell it for $11.99 or $12.99 a pound. Wow, we're doubling on it. Yeah, well, guess what? But it shrunk 20% during the cooking, so we're really only making 30 or 40 points. We've got 28 points of labor. As soon as I take 10% shrink, I've lost money on it. And then when you start saying, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sell a wild-caught sockeye salmon. I'm going to grill that in my deli. Well, now you're spending $11 a pound, and all of a sudden you're selling it at $25 a pound, and it doesn't sell. So, when it comes to prepared foods, you'll find that most folks are not willing to give you a very quality product. I mean, I was in a store the other day. I don't want to mention the name. I've been looking at food bars lately just because, we'd like to have one, someday when we grow up. And boy, what they had on the food bar was just, I looked at it and I just thought, I've never seen anything so white, pasty, and mayo-y in my life, and yet I know where they're coming from. I know it's costing them about $1.60 a pound to make this crap, and they're selling it at $5.99, and and people are thinking they're getting the value. You can't put the $6, $10, $12 a pound stuff, in an area where you really need to turn it, because you'll just go belly up. So I think that's why you won't see a lot of that product in any kind of an easy to use, ready to purchase, ready to eat format. At least I don't know of any.
I think for us, and I don't know how much of this is unique to our specific business, but one thing to consider in a deli and a retailer of any size is, odds are that they're also producing things for their own deli. I know we are, you guys do. So in a sense, you're kind of competing for space in there with products that we're making ourselves and wanting to push. So that's not to say you shouldn't try, but that's another sort of factor at play. It's an area that we're always, with any of the specialty diets, our particular style has been to sort of, see if that's getting a little bit of legs under it before we, do too much kind of whole hog, trying to, no pun intended with paleo, sorry, to, fill that niche. Now the paleo seems to be really taking off. I think half of our purchasing staff is on that at the moment. But those are just a couple of other factors to consider. If it's something that, is there a real solid market for it, and then in a deli case in particular, in addition to the challenges that were just mentioned, you're also, it's a very finite space in there. The stuff's got to sell, or it's going to be thrown away within days, and you're also potentially competing with what that particular retailer is making and wanting to promote as well. So.
Just in a restaurant context, it's been a tough sell to kind of integrate raw food and paleo style dishes into the mainstay. There are communities that really latch on to it, and I love that. And I love that in Michigan you do have folks who are educated and value being able to walk into a venue and pay to have that served to you. I think that it's tough but doable with restaurants coming to them and approaching them about offering them ingredients and items that would supplement a paleo style food diet or food dishes. The kind of one thing that I would suggest, maybe if you're interested in either offering something to a restaurant or maybe integrating something that you produce or create, is looking at the menu and seeing if there's maybe room for it. If you don't see any vegan, vegetarian options, there might not be an understanding from that ownership or restaurant group or management. That might also mean that maybe there's room for that, and that they haven't explored or don't have resources or a vendor who can bring that to them. Again, just asking or, kind of saying, what's your attitude? What's your feeling about raw foods or a paleo style diet? If they have nothing to say or have no clue, that might make you turn tail and run quickly, or it may, may have an hour-long conversation about it. Again, I was kind of shocked to find out that the owners I work for love raw foods, vegan options, and are very supportive of our kitchen experimenting and trying that. 9 owners out of 10, I feel like, without a big push, would kind of look at you crazy. And I've had some owners look at me kind of weird, suggesting that I not cook anything on a plate and serve it to folks for $12. But there's definitely room and growth in this, and I've seen more growth year after year after year. It just takes an uncomfortable amount sometimes of convincing and conversation and education, but there's definitely room if you believe and agree with the product that you make and that you distribute.
Also, from a marketing point of view, sometimes gluten-free is a good example, that if you have a really great muffin and you label it as gluten-free, you might lose some of the people that might enjoy eating that muffin because they think, I don't want to eat a gluten-free muffin. So, it isn't always... But then again, if you're trying to appeal to a certain group, like you want the gluten-free people to know that this is a muffin that they could eat, there's kind of a problem sometimes marketing things like that. But it's something to consider, that you could, if it's a really good food, then maybe other people would eat it too, as long as it's not looking like it's only meant for a certain group.
I think we're getting to the end here, and late night. If we could please. No, it's been great. A lot of great information. Definitely. I know I have learned a lot. I'm sure you guys have too. Can we thank all of our panelists here for all of their information, for coming out? down my notes so I don't forget. Again, want to thank all of our sponsors, Corner Brewery, People's Food Co-op, Washtenaw County Office of Community and Economic Development, Whole Foods Markets. We would also like to thank Dave Chappell and his team, Jessica Bibby and Jan Bendor from CTN for doing all the filming of all of our 4 workshops. They're here before we get here, and they stay late to make sure everything's good. And you can see how serious they are. I mean, look at all these different shots. This is great. I can't wait to see the video of it. And if you, too, can't wait to see the video, or you've missed one, or you want to suggest it to a friend, which I hope you do. I mean, that's why we did it. We were hoping that this would kind of reach out and help others that couldn't be here for various reasons. Eventually, the video will be on Ann Arbor Public Television on Comcast there. And then after that point, it will be on YouTube on Dave's with apostrophe S at the end, TV Zone. That's the channel. It'll be on Dave's TV Zone on YouTube after that. We will also have it, our 3 organizations, Think Local First, Growing Hope, and Whole Foods Market will have it on our Facebooks and our websites and other areas as well.
Yeah, so a lot of you have, as I've been checking and registering you for the last 2 weeks, you've been asking what's next. Well, we don't really know what's next. What we do know is that we want to know what you think. So we will be sending out a quick little survey. What did we do well? What did we miss? What are the next steps? Are there next steps? What are the needs? And can we help facilitate your growth and being able to move forward with the business you've already established, or the one that you want to create? Because one of the things that all 3 of us can do, 4 of us can do. Sorry, I'm totally standing in front of you, Christine. Is we're great resources. So if you have questions, feel free to come to us. I'm going to make that blanket statement without actually having checked with everybody up here, but I think you'll find that we're all very helpful, and that's one of the key things that I think you've heard throughout this series is when you need to know something, go talk to someone who's done it, because that way you can hopefully navigate without having to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's one of the things you'll find in this community is the local food groups are so passionate about what they do, and they really want to share their best practices. So those are my closing statements. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. This has been phenomenal.